Good evening, everyone. I'm Amanda Hunter from Together Social Care, and I'm here to join today by Pamela Thomas, who gave evidence to the Scottish COVID inquiry recently in the social care and health impact hearings, which end today. And to mark the occasion of the hearings, we decided that we'd like to talk to Pamela about her experience of the inquiry and what brought her to participate. And we will also discuss some of the themes throughout the inquiry hearings. And to introduce that, we're just going to have a quick clip of some of the impact hearing statements that were given.
We anticipate the inquiry will hear that people were pressured to agree to do not resuscitate notices, that people were not resuscitated even though no such notice was in place, that residents may have been neglected and left to starve.
For almost a year, guidance would not permit residents to leave the home or to go out for a drive in the car. The representative believes that in terms of the decisions that the government made, their effect on children has been, quote, horrendous.
Aye, that's what I says to him. I says my mum's no dying of COVID. My mum's dying of starvation and dehydration.
The doctors were lying to me on a daily basis. The nurses were lying to me on a daily basis. Everything that was in my brother's notes was different from what I was being told on a daily basis.
They'd found him on his hands and knees trying to get to the toilet. I was then told they were going to introduce end-of-life medication, which would be midazolam and, if needed, and morphine, and I was shocked.
I've ascertained that the sedative that she was given is one called midazolam.
That's correct.
And we've heard about midazolam from other witnesses. And
they'd really get into isolating people really badly that year. I mean, that was terrible. There was people being isolated people were coming in the group saying, my mum's been stuck in a room for 45 days.
And do you know what it felt like? It felt like I was going to the zoo and watching animals on display in the zoo. Don't touch, don't go near them, don't go near them. These were my parents.
Some seem to view the lives of those with Down syndrome as less worthy than others, and you give an example of a man in his 20s who attended the cardiologist with his mother, and the cardiologist during the pandemic said, "I do not know whether it's worth operating on someone like him."
I'm personally not convinced my mum had COVID.
Pamela, can you just tell us a little bit about what brought you to the Scottish COVID inquiry and encourage you to share your evidence of what happened to you and your family?
Yeah, well, what it was is I lost my brother James. He was 41 years old in Ninewells Hospital in Dundee in October 21. He had no underlying conditions. I don't believe that COVID was responsible for my brother's death. There was a multitude of hospital-acquired infections that my brother contacted while he was in hospital. I've been absolutely stonewalled from the police, from the Crown Office. I have evidence, I believe, that his signature was falsified to put him on a randomised control trial, and that trial withheld antibiotics. The list is just endless.
Thank you, Pamela, for sharing your story. I mean, your experience reflects so many of the stories that we've heard throughout the social care and health impact hearings. And we're very, very grateful to Dave, the researcher, who brought us that clip just now. Dave has been looking into the inquiry and posting coverage every day of the impact hearings given by families. And without him, the public would not know what is going on or was going on, because the mainstream media has not touched this story. They have not covered the Scottish COVID inquiry in any detail at all. And we're indebted to him for sharing the evidence with us on Twitter. Pamela, just can you talk a little bit about you talked about your brother and the horrific story, the horrific case. Can you tell us a little bit about what made you decide to give evidence and why you and how you got involved with the inquiry?
Yeah, well, I had an opportunity because my brother was classed as a COVID death to join Scottish COVID Bereaved and give evidence at Scottish COVID inquiry. That was an opportunity that I was very grateful to have. I was able to get my brother's story out there as to what actually happened to James. Although it was diluted, I still got a chance to give evidence. That opened a lot of other doors for me to continue discussing and telling James's story and be a voice for James.
Well, thank you, Pamela. Yes, and I think that's the experience that many families had, and I don't think they're going to have the same in the English inquiry. There will be that level of involvement from families, and I think it's been, extremely revealing and very telling, the stories that we've heard. I mean, we heard in that clip of people who were had DNRs put on them without their consent. We heard about people who were isolated. We heard about people who were put on end of life drugs way before their time. I mean, these stories all corroborate what we have been hearing from families in the UK as well. But we have not had that opportunity, and we won't have that opportunity until 2025. And it's very unlikely, as I said, that we have those personal statements that were able to be given to the Scottish COVID inquiry. You said your statement was diluted, and we have heard that from other people who were involved in the inquiry, that they said that their statements came back quite diluted, and they had to they did some of them had opportunities to ask those to be altered, but that was not always the case. Do you know of any cases like that?
I was personally, some bits of my statement wasn't quite right, but I was able to rectify it. I wrote back to the statement takers and they rectified my statement, and they were quite happy to before I signed it off. I do know of one current case at the moment of Leslie Roberts. She's been denied the right to give evidence at the inquiry, and that was due basically to frustration because her statements were really, really diluted. So that's been all over social media lately.
Yeah, I spoke to Leslie Roberts earlier today. Unfortunately, she was not able to join us, and she wants to tell her story in person. So we won't go into great detail about that. But yes, that was very much. She was supposed to contribute to the hearings, I believe, yesterday, and was put out at the last minute. So we think that's quite telling. The other thing is Bill, who we saw in the video before, the video clip, who was describing his father in the care home crawling across the floor, and the fact he'd been put on end-of-life medications. Now, we know from him that his story, his statement was very much diluted, and he had to send it back several times before he was actually happy with it. However, he says he was extremely happy about the opportunity to give evidence, and he felt that he was able to give the evidence that he wanted. However, he did say that families were told they were not allowed to mention the name of any care homes or any hospitals. They weren't allowed to use the word euthanasia. They weren't allowed to use the word midazolam, although we know that that has come out now. And that was eventually, they did allow people to talk about midazolam, but not to use the word euthanasia. And I believe, if I'm correct, if this word was mentioned, the tape would be rewound and they'd start again. So it seems to me that in order to get, if we are to learn lessons from what happened during COVID, we really need to be able to get to the truth. And in order to get to the truth, we should need to have a free exchange of information, and we should not be having witnesses told what they can and cannot say. As you were saying, Pamela, you were talking about your experience. You weren't allowed to mention the name of your brother at first.
Yeah, but they had our legal team had a meeting in chambers, and we were allowed to name our loved ones. But the initial rule was that we wouldn't be allowed to name any of our loved ones. Some of my statement did get cut at the end because I named other family members. I said my little brother's name, and a part of my statement got cut at the end. But other than that, it was okay for me.
Okay.
I wasn't allowed to name
you were very
doctors or
fortunate,
nurses. Or...
Yeah, I think you were very fortunate, but from what we've heard from other families who contributed evidence, that wasn't always the case. And as I say, I don't think, if we are to get to the truth, if families believe that their loved ones were euthanized, and put on end of life drugs, as we heard from the lady who said, my mother did not die from COVID, she died of dehydration and isolation. And then drugs. We heard that later in that lady's statement. And then Bill, the same, he was told his father, it was an absolute shock to him, as it was for many families. I mean, I myself in England, had the same experience. And, as you are a member of Together Social Care End of Life team, and you are, one of the members, and all of those people have all been impacted by this throughout the UK. And we have a couple of members from Scotland. So coming back to, if we can now play a clip of the impact of visiting restrictions on people in care homes.
Any game plan, it's just like we're locking you out, and we haven't sorted out how we might ever get you back in again.
How did you become aware of Professor Ferguson's paper?
Oh, you're just online all the time. I mean, I was up all night. I was up all night howling, and I was just online all the time, reading everything I could about the virus. And that paper was readily available. And I was also reading about a care home in Spain. By the 20th of March, the BBC had published a story about a care home in Spain where the residents had been abandoned, where everyone had ran away and left them all dead in their beds. And I had been working in Strathclyde and in South Lanarkshire, doing a lot of social work PR all my life, and I know there's nothing more dangerous than a locked institution. And I just think to keep people's loved ones away from them like that they were creating an extremely dangerous situation.
So Pamela, can you talk, we heard there from a lady who was talking about her loved one and being isolated, and talking about that she said there is nothing more dangerous than a locked institution. Now you and your family experienced lockout, didn't you, from the hospital? Can you explain some of your experience?
Yeah, so we weren't allowed in to see James at all. We were, every day I asked, can you retest him? Can you see if he's still positive? Can we get in beside him? Can we come to see him? And we were told no. The only way we would ever get in to see James is if he was going to die, when he was going to die. And even that didn't happen. James died alone, face down, swelling for days. James died alone.
It is absolutely heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. And the restrictions, the impact, as we saw before, the impact of restrictions, it's not that just people weren't able to see their loved ones. People in care homes or in hospitals, they rely on their loved ones to give them support. And we know that in hospital, there are not enough staff to help people feed, to help people to drink. And so people rapidly deteriorate, become dehydrated, lack of nutrition. I mean, this was happening in care homes up and down the country. More people we know died from isolation, neglect in care homes than died of COVID. And if we are to have a proper investigation, as I said, into what happened, we really do need to get to the truth. And it's such a shame and a scandal, I think, that the most damning policies of all in the UK will be discussed in 2025, when people are probably very, very COVID weary and inquiry weary. And so are we really going to get to the truth? I don't know. But it's been great to hear well, not great to hear, but it's been very useful to hear the stories from people who contributed to the Scottish COVID inquiry, including you, Pamela. We also heard about the impact of dehydration, of course, because when somebody becomes very dehydrated, they lose their ability to fight infection. They become very weak, and then they were put on end of life. And this is people way before their time, as in the case of Bill's father, Bill Jolly's father. Is there anything else you would like to add, Pamela, before we go?
No, that's all, Amanda. Thanks very much for giving me an opportunity to have James's voice heard yet again. So thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
And Pamela, we will definitely be talking to you again. We are going to be running a series on the COVID Scottish COVID inquiry hearings. This was just today was just to have to introduce you, as you are a member of the end of life group at team at the Together Social Care team. Which works on, we have a number of campaigns, and one of them is on end-of-life protocols, and this is the one that you are taking part in, and we're very pleased to have you with us. So we will come back to you, Pamela, soon,
Okay.
look into your story in more detail, and I'm hoping to get a number of families together so we can discuss and share your stories and try and learn the lessons. Lockdown, the impact of lockdown was absolutely devastating on those who were in hospitals and the families that had to look through windows or were totally excluded from the hospitals. So thank you very much for joining us and sharing your story. Thank you, Pamela.
Thanks, Amanda. Thank you.